Hey everyone, Wes here coming at you with my first YouTube video. In this video time-lapse, we'll be taking a look at some of the steps and techniques that I used to create this Buddha and lotus flower design. I had a couple of people reach out and ask about my process, so I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk through that. If you like the video and you want to see more, please subscribe to my channel, leave a like, and of course leave a comment if you have any questions or feedback. Enjoy. At this point in the drawing, I'm in the very early stages. You can see that I'm going back through and starting to add harder lines to the shapes that I had originally added. And this is really a big part of my process, just going through and filling out what I want this design to look like. I have the lotus flower in the background there, and then of course the Buddha figure in the front that I'm focusing on up front. And now that I have my rough outline, I'm going through and I'm starting to add some of the finer details to the face, to the ears, to the headpiece, as well as to the hands and the foot, as you'll see here shortly. For this part of the design, I am using an application called Procreate on my iPad Pro, alongside with my Apple Pencil. Procreate offers many brush options, including pencil brushes, which I'm using here to ultimately rough draft and sketch out my design. On top of Procreate, I use Adobe applications, including Adobe Illustrator, which will give me the ability to live trace this design in, which if I do this with high enough pixelation and DPI, I can what's called live trace this into Illustrator without losing really any of my detail. And what that does for me is it gives me a vectorized version of my design. It renders it as vectors so that I can scale in and out as I need without it looking pixelated or without losing any of the detail. As I'm creating the design, I am flipping back and forth on my phone, looking at images of Buddha statues that I have saved, pulling unique characteristics from those statues, ultimately creating my own. I've never drawn a Buddha before, I've never drawn a lotus flower, so I wanted to be transparent about my process and help encourage other creatives out there to have reference that you can pull from when creating your own unique designs. Now that I'm done with the rough draft of both the lotus and the Buddha, I am now going in and using the symmetry tool and creating the final outline for the lotus flower. The symmetry tool is especially helpful when you are working with a design that is of perfect symmetry down the middle, in that you don't have to duplicate your efforts. What you're doing on one side will be reflected on the other. Now that I've mostly finalized the outline for the lotus flower, I'm coming back and focusing in on Buddha, where I'm now starting to add the final outline for him. You may or may not have noticed that as I started to go in and add the final outline to first the lotus and now the Buddha, I switched from having a white to now a gray background. And the reason for that is simply because for this design, and really most of my designs, I am working with black and white colors, and I don't want those to blend into the background, limiting my visibility of where those strokes may be going if I'm overextending, for instance, and not recognizing it. Gray offers up an in-between that will allow me to make sure the design does look good for both a black and white background as I'm going through and creating this. Now I'm going in and beginning to add some of the white strokes and outline to my Buddha, which at this point I'm going in and doing so by adding detail to his robe. In some parts of the design, such as the headpiece in this case, you'll notice that I'm going in, I'm trying to fill out how I want that to look. I'm now going in, adding sort of a rough draft background to help ultimately decide the placement of the dots on his hat. But you'll see that I later go in and actually remove that, and I add them back in through a different method. So don't be afraid to come back to something if you aren't quite ready to cross that bridge, or if you find that you're growing frustrated after so many attempts. There's other areas of the design that you can easily go and focus your efforts on. Think about how you want to come back and approach that part of the design. So again, you'll see that with the headpiece here. You may have noticed earlier I tried to add it, I ended up removing it. I'll end up removing it again and going in and adding the dots again through a different method. You'll see now that I'm done with most of the outline on Buddha's garments, I'm now going in and playing around with some of the background components of this design, including that circle that sits behind his head, as well as the lotus flower, which I don't end up sticking with, and that's perfectly okay. You can go in with applications such as, Adobe Draw, Procreate, use layers to go in and add things that you may not end up keeping, that you can easily delete that layer if you don't end up liking how it looks, and that's exactly what I've done here. I'm now in the final stages of the design where I'm going to and adding more depth by going in, adding a circle or two behind the lotus flower. You'll see that I now go in and add and land on a method for how I want to add the dots to Buddha's headpiece, which this is really the last part of this design. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found the video helpful, and of course please subscribe to my channel if you want to see more. Leave a like on the video and also comment with any feedback or suggestions that you have for future topics. Thanks again.